Paco and me, we will bring Luis Loya in, and at that point, I will introduce him formally. So let me get to Paco Cantu. As I said, Paco is a Tucson writer, author of The Line Becomes a River, as well as other pieces on borderlands issues. He's produced essays and reviews appearing in the New York Review of Books and the New York Times Book Review. Himself very much a writer of place, he's the author also of pieces on art, culture, and place for various literary journals and anthologies. He won the prestigious Whiting Award several years back for his promise to produce significant work in his career. He is an Art for Justice Fellow, and he coordinates the Field Studies program for the Creative Writing Department at the University of Arizona. Speaking of field studies, and now I'm going to get a little more personal, Paco and I are colleagues of a sort. He helped me put the Agave Spirits program together at Crisol and has led several tastings for us. And he's one of the most knowledgeable people in Tucson, I would say, about Agave Spirits and Sotol. Field studies. I probably know Paco best as a friend and a travel companion. He might embarrass me about some of those stories tonight. Let's hope he doesn't, but he might. We knew each other prior, but our connection really developed over the course of many trips, searching out Bacanora and Sonora together. A lot of miles traveled, a lot of producers visited, at least several shots of Bacanora and Palmilla consumed along the way. Some details of those trips will surely come out of the conversation to come, and some probably won't because they shouldn't be repeated, right?
That's right.
Although you might tell the story of how I crashed your car in Bonamici, and you can tell that story.
Oh, wow. I wasn't going to, but now I'll have to.
Finally, Paco has been instrumental in bringing Amormata, which is now called La Mata, which is Luis Loya's export arm of his project, La Nación de las Verdes Matas. Paco's part of the team that brought those distillates to Arizona. He was the first among us to make contact with Luis Loya on a trip to Monterey some time back. Luis is our other presenter tonight, as you know, and it was their relationship that really got the ball rolling on an important endeavor, I think, and we're all proud of that endeavor. And two expressions from that endeavor actually make the bulk of the tasting for this evening. Now, before I turn it over to Paco, just real quick, we're going to start with, for those who have purchased spirits for tonight's tasting, we're going to start with the Sotol, or the Palmilla in this case, which is a Sotol from Sonora. This is a distillate derived from Dacylarian wheeleri, probably, although we're not quite sure which species of Dacylarian it is in this case. But this is the Sotol from Sonora. And if you had the Sotol from last week, you might note some similarities between that and this one, as Sotol does, I think, across its various expressions, have some things in common. Now, Paco is going to show us, I think, some images of Palmilla as he goes along, so I don't want to say too much about that. But that is the one we're beginning with, so if you have it, go ahead and pour it into a glass, and we'll sort of discuss that spirit along the way. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paco.
Right on. Thanks, Doug, for that lovely introduction. Can everybody see my screen? Should be a nice big picture of an agave. Is that working?
I can see it.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be part of this series. As Doug mentioned, the talk last night was fantastic. It feels like an honor to be part of the conversation that Jacob and Cheryl started, and that, you know, Doug, you, Ben, and Anna have been putting together. Paul and Susie Fish, Wendy Hodgson. I'm just very, very pleased to be part of the lineup. And you know, I guess I'll begin talking. You know, Doug mentioned that I'm a writer, and for a long time, as I became fascinated with agave spirits, um, I, you know, was wondering, is this a hobby? Because it became more than a hobby, became sort of an obsession, and so I've thought a lot about, what this is for me, because at first it felt very distinct from my work as a writer, um, like a side obsession or something like that. And what I've realized, I think, over the years reflecting on this, is that actually, I think my fascination with agave really has everything to do with my same writerly fascinations, which are namely landscape, culture, and narrative and story above all else, I guess. And I think that's because agave traditions, as everybody knows who's already on this call, they really reflect um, landscape in like a very striking way. And I also think that the agave as a plant, because they live so long, um, they really come to hold and reflect aspects of a landscape in a way that I think is very unique. And so when you drink an agave spirit or when you eat agave, I've come to really believe that you're communing with the lifespan of that agave, right? With the multiple years that agave has sat in a single place on a single hillside in specific soil next to specific different plants, depending on what environment it's growing in. And then you're also, of course, communing in a way with the people who harvest it, the people who distill it. And I think that few other things that we eat or drink are like this to that extent. When we talk about terroir, I think the first thing that comes to mind is wine. But wine, a vintage only holds the story of 1 year, whereas an agave spirit might hold the story of 25 years of one little hillside. And so that's at least how I've started to justify my fascination with agave as a writer. Um, and so Doug sort of started talking about this palmilla, which is a sotol from Sonora. And so if you haven't started tasting this, if you have it, like I think this is the perfect spirit to sort of encapsulate all those things that I'm talking about. When I taste this, I taste like dirt, soil, like earth in roots. Um, you can kind of like smell Sonoran rain. It sort of, I think, holds all the abundance and scarcity that we think of when we think of the Sonoran Desert. And
Paco, real quick, I
I'm
should
gonna
mention.
show. Oh yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead, Doug.
real quick, I should mention this is Mazot's palmilla, which was the first palmilla or Sonoran Sotol to be imported into the United States. Comes thanks to Mike Hurley and Borderland Spirits. Just wanted to mention that.
And here in the picture, this is our mezcalero, Sinue Chacon. Did I pronounce that right, Doug? His first name.
That's right. Yep.
Um, and you can see just a whole bunch of harvested heads ready to be roasted. This is hard work, as everybody knows, especially those of you who were listening last night. And I think, oh, so also, if Doug didn't already mention, these hills and these pictures here, this is the area outside of Bacanora, Sonora. So, this is a sotol from a very famous, kind of the most legendary capital of agave spirits in our region. And I have to say, if I go back to sort of the beginning of my fascination with mezcal, I really didn't have much knowledge or familiarity at all, even though I've spent my whole life in Arizona or grown up here. I really did not know about the agave spirit tradition in the borderlands or in Arizona. This is a newspaper clipping You all have probably seen a million times the label that Gary Nabhan resurrected a while back of the Julio Goldbaum Bacanora that was, sold here in Tucson. And this is a Spanish language advertisement advertising his club where he sells the best cigars and liquors, whiskeys, brandies, wines, and the legitimate mezcal from Bacanora. So, this history, which includes a lot of excellent smuggling. This is another newspaper clipping from basically like a dispatch by a Los Angeles Times reporter about mezcal smuggling in Guadalupe Canyon, which is outside of Douglas on the border. And so, we begin to understand once we start looking at this that it's been going on, for as long as people have been here. This is Doug and I with some other Tucson friends, some bartenders who you might recognize, Brian from Penca, a botanist that you might recognize, our friend Robert Villa. And then there in the center, that's Dennis Maroney, who's a rancher outside of Bisbee, and, has tons of agaves on his land and has let us harvest at least once. To cook some of his agaves. And so I think I guess to sort of I think that this would be conjecture about the people on this call, but I think that many people on this call might have had a similar journey with mezcal that I had, where really I heard mostly about mezcal from Oaxaca. And the first time I really tasted and enjoyed mezcal from Oaxaca was because I had a good bartender, Brian, who's in this picture, who worked at Penca and really started bringing some, he was one of the first bars in Tucson to really bring, good agave spirits to Tucson. And Brian's also a storyteller. And so, when I had Brian as my bartender telling stories about this mezcal while I was drinking it, I really started to love the spirit. And this was, gosh, I don't know, 7 years ago or something like that. And then a few years after that, I took my first, I took a trip to Oaxaca, not my first trip, but the first trip that I had taken as a aficionado, a budding aficionado of mezcal. And so, my interest with agave brought me all the way to the opposite tip of Mexico. That was the first place that I visited a palenque. And anybody who's visited a palenque knows that a certain magic spell gets cast on you when you visit your first palenque and you meet your first mezcalero. So, all of that magic, that spell was cast on me very far away from home. And I think it was coming back from that trip through sort of this friendship with Brian and with Doug, all of us in love with Oaxacan spirits, that, we began to say, well, we should travel in Sonora, the same way that we, go find, search for, you follow the trail that one guy at a gas station tells you that the guy up the road, he makes mezcal. You go up the road, you go to the wrong house, they send you to the other house. We realize that this same kind of traveling and finding out about who's making mezcal, where is it, that can happen in Sonora as well. And so we began, as Doug mentioned, to sort of take some trips through Sonora. And, you meet just these incredible characters, real salt of the earth. Here, this is in Huepac, Sonora, which is in the Rio Sonora Valley. So pretty much if you draw a line almost straight south from Naco, you'll arrive in the Rio Sonora Valley. And I think what we were tasting this day was a blend of sotol and agave. Just, that's what they had harvested that weekend. So that's what they were brewing up. This is a video of our favorite mezcalero, our favorite sotol maker, Kachimba, who, really epitomizes, I think, this sort of salt of the earth tradition. We would find out long after meeting him, that he's also a cowboy of great renown in the Rio Sonora Valley. And here you get a sense for his animated nature. So what he's showing us there is the ways that you sort of hatch mark the sides of the sotol before you put it in for baking. And here is his oven, which is a communal oven. And he has a communal distillation center in the Rio Sonora. And which, I think it is really the way things were probably done, even more in the past, right? Once somebody makes the investment and does all the labor of setting this up, it's something that they make available to other people. So here you can see in the foreground, these are agave cabezas, and these are sotol, and he's going to roast all of that up together. And I'm not sure if he divided that up or distilled it and fermented it together as well. Here's another great shot of Cachimba being very animated. See what he's doing here. Showing us where he's harvested these. Here is his fermentation tank, which is, something I think as you begin to travel, speaking towards the theme of local agave traditions, what you really discover is that people are making agave spirits with, first and foremost, whatever they have at hand. And so, these plastic 50-gallon, what looks at, what we use as rain tanks or something behind our house. These are very prevalent, as are the steel ones. And so in Sonora, you see that, this is one of the prime fermentation vessels. Here is some fermenting sotol.
Cuando vea que esté bien amargo, entonces ya está, y que se bajó el agua. Esta ya está bajando el agua, ¿ves? Ahorita está dulce.
So he's saying that, he's giving us a taste. He's saying that it's still very sweet, and he's sort of telling us, how you taste it each day, and once it gets, really bitter, that's when it's ready. So this is Doug and Brian and I in Bacanora, where the Mazot Palmilla is made. And, speaking to the theme of landscape, the landscape also determines a lot about these distillation techniques. So we've traveled through a few different valleys in Sonora where mezcal is made, and you see sort of like hyper regional variations in the distillation. For example, in the Rio Sonora, where our friend Cachimba is, I don't think we've encountered anybody using this kind of canoa, which might be made of wood, might be made of, here it's two steel tanks soldered together. But if you go one river valley over to the San Miguel River Valley where Bacanora is, you see that these are pretty prevalent. And you realize, if you sort of like rewind, that a lot of this just gets passed down from whoever was making mezcal in that area, that that's their progeny, that's how they learn. Then the neighbor who wants to get into it, that's what they learn. And so you see these variations, and Luis is going to talk about how this looks in completely different border states. So you really get an idea for the diversity. This is in Sonora, but much further south, near the border with Chihuahua, a few hours drive from Alamos. And here you see a sombrero that's made from a tree trunk. This is the first time I've seen that in Sonora. It's the only time I've seen that in Sonora. And this is a very remote ranch. doesn't have access to, you know, the beer kegs and stuff that a lot of people use to kind of like cut in half and use as a sombrero, or it doesn't have access to a copper pot. So he's using a tree trunk from the ranch that's hollowed out in the middle and placed on top of the distillation tank. And this is his fermentation. He's not fermenting at the moment, but this is his fermentation vat. And it's a Tecate refrigerator, basically from, you know, the Tecate 6 store, that no longer worked and was about the right size and volume to ferment in. So that's what he ferments in. Oh, this is a video.
Y esta manguera se la pongo al tubo y le meto lumbre para que empiece a chorrear.
Esa es la canoa.
Esa es la canoa. Le digo
Ese
que
es el sombrero.
este es el sombrero.
You can see the oven back there.
Y ahí abajo está el tambo.
This is further north again, in the San Miguel Valley. And this is a kind of crude, basic, below ground fermentation tank. So, you know, as you move further north in Sonora, as we know, you know, the differences between the temperature during the day and during the night can be quite extreme. So a lot of folks in some of the more, you know, exposed areas that deal with these temperature extremes, they'll bury their fermentation vats. You know, sometimes they'll have a concrete in-ground fermentation tank. This is one of the, you know, this is just a big, what, like a 500 gallon or a 1,000 gallon, you know, cattle tank, cattle water transport holder. Oh, this is our friend Luis. Anyway, let me look through my notes here. So I guess, you know, during these trips through Sonora, with Doug, you know, is when I really began to understand, I think, like the huge breadth of agave practices. Because, I mean, how long has it been, Doug, that we've been taking these trips? Only 3 or 4 years at the most?
I think 4 years, over the course of 4 years, several trips. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, really even just in the course of like the first 2 years that we started taking these trips, you would see just a huge breadth of different techniques. You know, we've met people who are fermenting their agave in cow hide because they're cattle ranchers. You know, you meet people who, you know, are doing the in-ground fermentation, above ground fermentation, people who are saving up to sort of improve, people who are, sort of jettisoning the more modern kind of plastic fermentation stuff as they save up enough money because they want to go back to the way that their parents or their grandparents distilled. And the way that they distilled back then, you know, isn't attainable because those, you know, the things that have become readily available are different. And so, you know, people will kind of, as, you know, distilling agave becomes more profitable for some of these folks. For example, the people who distill Rancho Tapua, who are doing the tasting next month, the Contreras family, you know, one of their big projects that they would like to do in the near future is to sort of resurrect an old part of the ranch where, you know, the father remembers his father distilling, and it's now completely overgrown with bushes and weeds, but you can still see the ovens, you can still see the in-ground fermentation tanks, and it's, you know, a dream of theirs to sort of dig out the dirt that has settled in these fermentation tanks, pull the weeds, and, you know, resurrect this corner where, you know, their father and grandfather were distilling mezcal.
Yeah, it's an interesting move, and just a little comment. It's an interesting movement, as you know, as the Bacanora industry and northern mezcals sort of capture more attention on the market. There are efforts afoot to kind of, you know, bring back the old ways, to do really small lots, special expressions, special releases of these things. And of course, those barrancos are those underground fermentation lines, so they're nothing like like this. They're just old rock-lined pits. And so these are kind of modern archaeological sites, really interesting projects happening there.
Yeah, and Doug, I think that's a perfect, the mention of archaeology, I think is sort of the perfect reminder of the theme from last night, that kind of these are all just this is all modern day evidence that points to the fact that, agave culture is truly sort of pan-American, right? It unites this entire region from where we are to the very tip of Mexico. And as we heard last night, basically like wherever agaves were growing, they were used as food, they were used as drink, they were used as fiber and material for rope and clothing and etc. And so, as I to sort of finish my own little journey with agave up until now, this interest in Sonora and like discovery of everything that's happening in Sonora, as Doug alluded to, on a lot of these trips, we would wonder, what's happening across the border in Chihuahua, and then why haven't we ever tasted a mezcal from Nuevo León or from a few years ago Tamaulipas, or Baja California? I've still yet to taste a mezcal from Baja California. But all of these states have mezcaleros squirreled away, secreted away somewhere. They may not be exporting their wares. But during a family trip with my mom to Monterrey, which is where my grandfather is from, we had on the horizon this trip to sort of go visit some family sites. My mother had never been there, so we were going together, and I really, as I try to do on every trip to Mexico, wanted to incorporate some agave sightseeing, some mezcal sightseeing into the trip. And so I began to sort of, see if there was any mezcal available from Nuevo León. I couldn't find any in the U.S. I think maybe I heard of some that was available in California. And I found, on Instagram, on social media, I found this brand, Nación de las Verdes Matas, which Doug mentioned. And, that led me to get in touch with Luis Loya. I think I sent him an Instagram message. And, we did some messaging back and forth, and I said, I'm going to be in Monterey on these dates. I'm taking a birthday trip with my mom. And he said, oh, it's your birthday? Well, you should come, do a tasting, and we'll make you a carne asada because it's your birthday. And so, all of a sudden I ended up in Monterey with Luis Loya here. This is, a 5-gallon jug or a 3-gallon jug from his collection. This is his wonderful tasting room. And Luis is a kindred spirit who has, spent years, as is evidenced by this beautiful collection. He's spent years traveling, throughout Mexico, but especially in the northern states and the borderland states. And so I think I'll leave it at that. That's how I met Luis. Luis was generous to take me and my mother into the Sierra in Nuevo León, introduced me to one of his producers. This is the Torres family. This is the kind of landscape that we're talking about up there. You can see the agaves along the fence line. And so I'll turn it over to Luis so that he can talk more about his project. And then hopefully we'll come back together and answer questions and taste some Amormata.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paco, and thanks for sparing me the story of the car crash. Appreciate that.
See if it comes up in the Q&A.
Maybe it'll come up in the Q&A. Let me take a second to introduce Luis in a little more formal way. Luis grew up on a cattle ranch in Chihuahua and has always had a passion for exploring small-scale traditional products from remote communities throughout Mexico, but especially in the northern states where he grew up and continues to live. This exploration has been based around traditional mezcal for many years, which has now culminated in the Nación de las Verdes Matas project. And in Luis's own words, quote, "We are really trying to bring in mezcal from northern Mexico from places that are underrepresented in the market, but have some of the most flavorful, interesting distillates in all of the country," unquote. To that end, Nación has solid relationships with traditional producers in Durango, Nuevo León, Sonora, Chihuahua, San Luis Potosí, and Tamaulipas. Beyond that northern focus, which is unique and important, I want to say that, to my mind, Nación de las Verdes Matas is one of the premier mezcal initiatives. The point of it is not to scale up production to take advantage of the market popularity of mezcal right now, which is always sort of a pressure. Rather, it's kind of like a gift, it seems to me, offering it to us northern mezcal making unadulterated. Very small batches. Batches tend to be, as they were produced historically, from something like 40 to 200 liters, very small, rare bird kind of batches. Unmanipulated, at the proof that it's consumed by local tradition. Again, in Luis's words, quote, "Without watering down or changing anything in the process, Amormata, which is now in the US going to be La Mata, so everybody knows, will continue to be a vehicle that transmits the gusto histórico, the terroir, the liquid culture and history that is mezcal to people beyond the borders of the places where it's made."
Okay.
To conclude, Luis wants us to understand mezcal as a vehicle that transports the sense of time, geography, and tradition to people outside of these communities via the tastes and aromas of these beautiful mezcales. And before Luis begins to speak, and he will be aided by Hugo Rodriguez, who represents La Mata here in the United States via his company of Spine and Vine. We're going ahead and transition in the tasting toward the first expression of Amormata or La Mata, which is going to be the Tamaulipas. And I want to leave it to Luis to, as he sees fit, to describe this particular mezcal. If he wants me to go over the details, I will, but perhaps I'll leave it to him to do that. Anyway, we're transitioning from the Sotol or the Palmilla from Sonora to the Tamaulipas expression from Amormata. All right, Luis.
Thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here with the community. I admire all the work you're doing. And I ask for apologies. My English not very good, but here is Hugo who's going to save me in some parts that I get tired or I don't find the word. So I have a lot of material that I want to share with you. Well, we're going to taste these two mezcal. One is from Tamaulipas and other is from Durango. We have already the Palmilla, the Sotol. So here is the map. Here is Texas. Here is Tamaulipas. I live here in Nuevo León. I am from Chihuahua, right here. And we're going to taste in blue, Durango. Okay, so we're going to start with Tamaulipas. Here is Tamaulipas. At the border is Texas. The capital, Ciudad Victoria, and we are going to taste a mezcal from this region of San Carlos and Nicolas too. Well, we use a lot here ficha técnica, which shows the information about the spirit. We're going to taste this spirit from Tamaulipas. It's an ensemble. It's mixed with 3 agaves: Agave Americana, Asperrima, Univitata. Okay. One of the particular characteristic is they use the jugo. I don't know if you understood. Juice is only the liquid, where it's roasted and cooked. This is squeeze the agave and it get the juice like the tequila. Okay. So let's talk about a little bit some history here. At Tamaulipas, they have tribes or nomadic tribes. These are more like Apaches, more than the Aztecs. The people who was writing or describing these tribes They say that was like 70 different tribes. It's called like chichimecas, but the people from Spain who was trying to recognize every tribe, one of these tribes, they call it mezcalero. It's not the Apaches, but because they eat a lot of mezcal, roasted agave, they call it mezcalero. Hugo, can you explain a little bit more about this, please?
Yes, thank you, Luis. Like as Luis mentioned, like in this part of Tamaulipas, at that time, it was like around 70 different tribes, like don't let go to confuse with the Apaches from New Mexico. It was other tribes here in Tamaulipas, like they used to cook the agave, but also like they distill the agave. They used to do mezcal in Tamaulipas. So before it was called Tamaulipas, so the state, it was called Nueva Santander. La Nueva Santander is when the Spaniards arrived into this area, like it was a little bit complicated, at that time, to arrive to this specific place. It was hard to get in. Yeah, you can continue, Luis.
Okay. Well, part of the history was the first people that came to live here. It was for the minery, and in San Nicolas they found a minery, so they captured some natives from here and bring people from San Luis Potosí. So this is how it started the culture of mezcal, of making mezcal of spirits with the people that came from San Luis Potosí. They introduced the spirit, the distillation here in the region because was a lot of agave. This is the landscape of San Carlos, Las Vírgenes. This is the land of Jose Castellano, the maestro or the mezcalero. Here is cultivating corn. If you can see, is a lot of bushes, but these bushes have a lot of storm. How we translate storm, Hugo?
What, sorry?
Spinas. There was
thorny. It's a thorns, like spinas. Yeah, it's a really thorny place. It's really bushy.
Very hard to walk right around here. So this is one of the agaves that they use. This unibitata. This called mole, and this has a lot of sugar. The traditional mezcal from Tamaulipas, from the region, always has to be this mixture of these three agaves, of Americana Prima and this unibitata, called amole. This is the agave Americana, and this is other Prima. We have here a trouble of ID. These two agaves mix a lot and hybridize a lot. So we have a different agaves mixed. I don't know how to translate. It's not, we don't have this unique like you see here. This always get mixed. These two agaves, and this called maguey. Doesn't have a regional name. You call it maguey. You can see here las piñas, as you call it, cabezas. Here is a different typographies of these cabezas. It's not like equal. Always are different because this hybridization of these two agaves. You can see here in the roasting, this is Jose Castellano. You hear this cabezas or piñas from Unibitata, Amole, and these other ones, this between Asperma and Americana. Well, as I told you about the squeeze, the roasted agave to obtain the juice, they use this artifact, this green sugar cane green. Molino, that's right, green?
Sugar cane meal, yeah.
Yeah. Also, they put it here, the roasted agave, and they begin to squeeze. This is pulled by a horse around of the grain. The reference is here. This is a picture from Hacienda Mezcalera from San Luis Potosí. They use the taona. So in the topography of Tamaulipas, it's very hard to use this taona because they have in some way the agave se termina is gone, so they have to move, but it's very hard to move this molino. So they import this green of sugarcane green from Nuevo León. They have a plantation of sugar canes. You know what is sugar canes, Paco? Sugar cane. Las cañas de azúcar.
Sugar cane.
Yeah, okay. So this sustitutes the trapiche.
So that's a sugarcane press.
Yeah.
Right. That's been modified for.
As I told you, they use it only to use as in Jalisco, where is the tequila. In all these states, San Luis Potosí, Tamaulipas, and Guanajuato, Aguascalientes use it too. But this line is used only to use. It's not like in Sonora or Oaxaca or other places that use the bagazo. They uses only the use. Okay. So something very interesting for the states of North is the Prohibition era in the United States. They have a lot of relationship, a commercial relationship within the states of the South of United States. So Tamaulipas is one of these cases. So in this exchange of commercial exchange, they introduced the atom steel. It's a patent from the United States. Bring this the moonshiner use it. So this is the translation of the Adam steel to the Tamaulipas distill. Can you help me a little bit, Hugo, with this?
Yeah, like what Luis trying to explain, in this draw is like what the moonshiners, in that part of the state used to use. Like as you can see in the middle of the barrel, it is like what they in the state they call it the tumbreque, what the moonshiner world, they use. So it's what you can find right now in Tamaulipas. So people, during the Prohibition era, they decide to move to Mexico from the United States to keep doing alcohol. So people in Tamaulipas, they saw and they start to learn and see them, like what they were doing. So like they improvise, like they do their own stills. And in the next photos, you will see, what I'm talking about. But the main reason in Tamaulipas, you will find this thing is called the tumbreque. In moonshine world, I believe like they use it to add some flavors, when they are doing the first run. But in Tamaulipas, it's just aesthetic thing. Yeah, you can keep going with.
Yes, there is the barrel in between the pot and the serpentine or culebra, as in Sonora said. You can see here, vinata. Here is the steel. There is the barrel between the serpentine and the pot that is here in the oven. Here is another one. There is the barrel, but this doesn't have any use. No uses. This is Jose. So I don't know if you are the people who has this spirit, if it's drinking now, before we go to the next mezcal. If you have any question, any observation, we can do it about this way of making mezcal in Tamaulipas.
So, te están preguntando qué hace la segunda condensación, la segunda destilación.
Puedes contestar.
¿Qué hace Luis? Yeah.
Okay, we'll go with the next.
Okay.
Well, we'll go to Durango. Here is the capital in the middle. There is two region mascaleras. There is Nombre de Dios, desert, and Mezquital is mountain. So we're going to try a mezcal from Nombre de Dios. It's Agave Verde, Salmiana, and Maestro Pepe Cimental. And this is the land of Agave Verde.
No.
This is the Agave Verde. You can see all these rocks. These rocks are volcanic rocks. This is the ground of this part. It's called Breña, and it's used volcanic rocks. You can see here. Here is the agaves, and here is the volcanic rock. This is Pepe, and this is the Agave Verde Salmiana. It's a kind of whitey because some year get very frozen year, and it gets frozen the leaves, and that's why this is not sick. It's used because es una cicatriz del invierno.
So a scar from freezing
Frost.
temperature.
Yeah, like we got really cold. It was the frost, you know, like that's what happened in that photo.
Right.
Here's the roasting. This is very useful. This rock is volcanic rock. Here you can see they use it for the cooking. And I like a lot this picture. This avinata. Avinata is the part where is distilled, the fermentation and distill of the spirit. It came from the name of vino. All Mexicans call mezcal only the roast agave, but vino is the liquid, is the liquor. So this vinata came from wine of vino mezcal. So that's why the vinata in the north of Mexico, like Tamaulipas, Nuevo León, including Durango. So in this part, it gets the roast agave, and it's matched by axe. Then after we go to the fermentation area. This is our line batteries in the underground, and there is the steel. You can see the line batteries. It's the same case as Paco said before, because in the night it's very cold, so the ground it keep warms the fermentation. It keep going during the night and during the day. That's why they use it underground. This is the steel. We have here the oven, and here this is a cone. It's called viejo, and this one is a bitoque. Let's see how this works. Here we have a pot of copper pots where is the ferment, and there is the cone called viejo. It's a wood, and this one is called bitoque. In nombre de Dios is a wood. In el mezquital is made by cactus, old cactus, or quiote from agave, and it's connecting with the serpentine or culebra to can the distill.
So Luis, it's like a cholla cactus, or it's the flower stalk from an agave. Right?
Yes, it's a long one. It's like it's called pitaya.
A pitaya.
I don't know if it's Sonora or
okay.
This is Manuel. This is the master distiller. He does the fermentation and the still. And here is part of the team of Pepe Semental. And something that I have to say about this picture is that the most important working with all these families is the confidence. I've been working with some like 10 years ago, and others less years, but we have always this relationship that is very important for continue with this project, Nación de las Verdes Matas. So we have very good relationship. Sometimes I go and sleep, Pepe or Jorge Torres, the picture that Paco's showed us before. So these are very good friends, and these are very partners of doing this project. So we have part of these two expressions. We have a lot of other expressions from other states and other agaves, and that's all. Thank you. I don't know if you have any questions. Sorry for my English, and I hope I can answer all your questions. Thank you.
No, your English is fine. Thanks for presenting in English for the benefit of the crowd. There's a couple questions. One is, that sort of 3-chamber arrangement in Tamaulipas. the moonshine still system with the chamber in the middle, is that exclusive to is that only in Tamaulipas, do you think?
Yes, yes, it's only exclusive in Tamaulipas. It's only aesthetics because they don't have any use anymore. You see, the Adam steel was so when the vapor go to the tamper, it came back some parts to the oven or to the pot again. So it's cyclic, but here is doesn't have any use anymore. It's only aesthetic.
So
You know, Luis is talking about this the trapiche that was originally for sugarcane production. I think it's really unique and special that that is being used to make mezcal in Tamaulipas. Doug and I once took a trip to what's the name of the town in Sonora that's famous for making sugarcane and panuela or panela?
It's near Ures. I think it's Guadalupe, right?
Ures, yeah, Guadalupe de Ures. Yeah, so Doug and I, you know, Doug knew that there's this town in Sonora that's famous for sugarcane production, and you know, we went out of our way to visit one time specifically to see if they were making, if you know, anybody there had any memory of people making aguardiente de caña, so like a sugarcane rum, or to see if anybody had started, you know, repurposing these old, you know, sugarcane mashing techniques to make agave. And they're, you know, and it's like a weird alchemy or a certain, you know, series of events that has to happen, and it just never happened there. You know, people looked at us like we were crazy. You know, no, we don't make that here. Nobody's ever made that here. And you would think if you're just mashing sugarcane and you've got all the juice right there that you would ferment it and make you know, some rum on the side, or that you would, you know, use we visited an old trapiche, an you know, beautiful trapiche made in the United States in like the what was it, Doug? It had like a date stamped on it. 1890s, 1880s.
1893, Montgomery Ward or something like that. Yeah, an old machine.
And they were still using it, but they had never used it to mash agaves. They had never, and you know, so the fact that all of the things happened in Tamaulipas in order for, you know, for those dots to get connected, it's a really special mezcal. Yeah.
I mean, if you don't mind, I would like to mention something. You know, with Tamaulipas, it's really something specific because it's a lot of history behind. So it's like they have two deals different. I believe like they start with the tequila, they have the mezcal one and the tequila one also, you know. And at the same time, during the Prohibition era, you know, like there was an exchange of things with moonshiners, as you can see, you know, with the distill. First of all, and also, you know, like was smugglers in that side also, you know, like they cross, you know, to Texas, you know, a lot of tequila. Also, I want to mention something like, I believe like in Tamaulipas, it used to be like the first premium tequila in the United States was made from a company called La Gonzaleña. And you can find it still in the United States with the name of the Chinaco, I believe. So it's like, overall, you know, like Tamaulipas, you know, had a lot of history behind.
I would like